Karen Covy is a divorce coach, life strategist, lawyer, mediator, speaker, and author. She coaches busy professionals and business owners who want to make clear, confident decisions during highly charged emotional situations like divorce. Karen helps her clients become the CEOs of their own divorces so they can navigate through divorce with less conflict, less expense, and less damage to themselves and their children. Karen's the author of When Happily Ever After Ends, How to Survive Your Divorce Emotionally, Financially, and Legally. And she's also the creator of the online divorce program, The Divorce Roadmap, and the host of the podcast, Off the Fence. Now, Karen's been a guest on the Find Me the Money podcast with us before. I am so happy to have her back talking with me today. Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, Tracy. I am so glad to be here with you today.
Well, it is always fun to talk divorce with you because you are such a wealth of information. You've got decades of experience being a recovering divorce lawyer. So you've kind of seen it all. And today we are so happy to have you talking about retirement accounts with us because this is really a hot button issue for many women in divorce, isn't it?
100%. Because for most people, the two biggest assets that there are in a marriage are the house and the retirement account. So what you do with both of those assets is really important and can be really emotional.
Well, it really plays into your very long-term future, right? I see women coming out of divorce saying, I've had to go back to work and I really don't know if I'll ever be able to retire. And so we need to think really carefully at divorce time about the retirement accounts and about the home equity and what's going to happen to those, right?
100%. I agree completely.
Okay, so don't touch my retirement account. That's what women hear so often in divorce from their husbands. That retirement account is his. He earned it and he should keep it. But as we know, it is really common for women to put their careers on hold. Either they're raising children or they're maybe moving around the country for his career. And let's face it, she has every right to part of that retirement account. And she really needs it because her ability to build her own retirement account is likely compromised when they're getting divorced, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing. He may feel like the retirement account is his because it's in his name and it was based on his earnings during the marriage, but it's the during the marriage part that's important because anything earned or acquired during the marriage, unless you have a prenup that says otherwise, is marital property. So he may feel like the retirement account is 100% his, but that's absolutely not true.
And certainly on social media, I, publish videos to help women, give them tips about divorce and the money. And I get feedback from men saying he was going to work and it was his name on the paycheck. And I keep reminding them over and over, she was a valuable contributor to the marriage and the money either of them earns belongs to both of them. So it goes both ways, right? If she's the breadwinner, her retirement account is part his as well.
Absolutely. And I work with a lot of women who are the primary breadwinner in the family. And this is really gender neutral. It just so happens that in our society, more times than not, it's the woman who gave up the career and raised the kids and the man who was the primary breadwinner. But that's not always true anymore.
Right. I often see women walking away from a pension or a 401k and whatever their share of it is. The husband might say something to them like, if you leave my retirement account alone, I'll let you have the house. But isn't she really entitled to part of both the retirement and part of the house?
Yes. And here's the thing, if you don't have to divide an asset, sometimes it makes sense to, give one person all of one asset, the other person all of another asset. But that doesn't always make sense. And the house and the retirement account are not equal assets because even if the equity in the house is the same as the amount in the retirement account, the house equity is post-tax dollars. The retirement account is usually pre-tax dollars, right? And so when you're comparing value, you're not comparing apples to apples. The other thing to think about when you get the house, if you get the whole house, and 6 months after the divorce, you decide to sell the house, guess who's eating 100% of the closing costs? You are. And so that's generally also not factored into what's the value of the equity in the house, right? So there are a lot of things to think about. And one of the main things people don't really think about is that the money in the house isn't liquid. You can't just go to the bank and take out, $5,000 if you need it for some unexpected expense. A retirement account, if it's a 401k and it's in your name, you may be able to take a loan out against it. You may be able to, even if you're 59 and a half, you can take it out without penalty. You could take out a certain amount of money. Yeah, you're going to pay the taxes on it, but you're not going to pay the penalty. And there are certain, instances where in emergency situations, you may be able to tap into that money without penalty even before you're of the right age. So there's a lot that goes into considering each one. It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing at all. There are tax consequences, there's the liquidity issue and whether you can access it. And, there's a lot of emotion tied to the house. And there are a lot of women who want to keep the house, and men will use other valuable assets as leverage on that issue. And it can turn out fair financially, certainly. But what I've seen more often than not is it doesn't turn out fairly.
Yeah, it can. I mean, if you really analyze it, you get the right professionals to help you figure out what everything is worth and what makes sense to you, and you look at all the pros and cons of trading one for the other, it can absolutely work out. But to your point, it can not be fair either. So it's about educating yourself, understanding what you're doing, and making a choice based not only on what you feel, but what you think.
Okay, so there are different types of retirement assets that people may have. And I want to make sure that everyone knows what we're talking about because they need to know what they're talking about in their divorce, whether it's a pension or an IRA or a 401k. Can you give us just a little bit on the differences on those and how that will play into the divorce?
Okay, so there are two kinds of retirement assets. One is a defined benefit plan, and that says that when you retire, you're going to get X amount of dollars per month until the day you die. That's a pension. The other is a defined contribution plan. That's a 401k. I deposited $1,000. I contributed 1,000. Maybe my employer contributed another 1,000. I get a statement at the end of the month or the end of every quarter that says you have X dollars in your plan. And the amount in the plan goes up or down depending on whether what it's invested in. Does whatever I've invested in, does it make money or lose money, and how much money have I put in, how much money has my employer put in. So those are two very different kinds of plans. Pensions are usually the main defined benefit plan. Defined contribution plans can be 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, blah blah blah. Another differentiating factor is the money in the account pre-tax dollars or post-tax dollars? And just sort of as a generalization, the Roth IRA is going to be post-tax money. All of the rest are generally going to be pre-tax money. And that's important to know when you're comparing values of I get this and you get that you're really comparing the same thing. Because if you look at a value, $100 pre-tax is not the same as $100 post-tax.
Right, because that money in that account that's called pre-tax means when we take that $100 out, we will have to pay tax on that. And so what you end up with that you're able to spend is less than $100. Whereas that post-tax account has already been taxed. And when you take $100 out, that's your $100 to spend, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we're getting divorced and we're going to split some retirement assets. The pension stuff, that gets a little bit complicated, right? Because you have to figure out what the value is going to be down the road when someone retires.
The hard thing about a pension, remember, if you get a pension statement, most of the time it's going to say you get X dollars per month when you retire. Well, what is that when in a divorce, you've got to look at what is the value of that asset today and divide that value. You can't tell that from the statement, right? It's not like you have $100,000 in a pension. You get X amount of money per month when you retire. So the only way to really value a pension is to get a valuation done by an actuary, by a pension expert, right? And sometimes the pensions now, these days, they may actually have values that they can give you. You can, call up the pension program and they'll tell you, yeah, it's worth blah, 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 whatever it is. But by and large, the only way to get it valued is to go to an actuary, which means you have to pay this professional money, give them all the information that they need. They input it into a formula, they calculate, they crunch numbers, and then they come out and say, oh, okay, this pension is worth X. And then you know what the pension is worth. And so one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is just saying, oh, yeah, you can keep your pension. They don't even know the value of what they're giving away. And it can be, when you do crunch the numbers, you can be shocked at what the value of a pension is, especially if somebody's been working in a certain job for decades. That pension is probably worth more than you think.
Right. Well, then there's something called a QDRO, and that's spelled with all capital letters QDRO, and we say QDRO. I want to talk about that because it is so, so important for people to understand what that is, why you need it, how it works.
Okay, a QDRO is short for Qualified Domestic Relations Order. It comes from a federal law regarding benefits, right? And so the QDRO is the document that you need to divide up any kind of retirement plan. Sometimes IRAs don't require a QDRO, but everything else generally does, right? So the QDRO, what people need to know is this is an additional document besides just your divorce judgment. So people think that they get their divorce judgment and they magically, the money just appears in their account, it gets divided. That's not how it works. You need a separate court order, and this court order is very complicated. Every single plan is different, so it's got to be written specifically for the plan that you're talking about. The plan has to approve, the plan administrator has to approve of the QDRO, and there are a lot of steps that you've got to go through to make sure that the QDRO gets entered and the money gets properly divided. Without that order, there is no division of the retirement asset. I don't care what that judgment says. So what's important for people to know is that when they just get the divorce judgment, it's not just over. It doesn't magically happen. You've got to follow up. You've got to make sure that QDRO is entered. And then you've got to watch, if it's an IRA 401k, you've got to watch your account and say, do I see the money in my account? Did it get transferred over? And if it's a pension, then that's even more tricky because you're not going to see that. You're not going to see that until, it's retirement time for your spouse. So you're not going to know whether that QDRO really was written properly and worked or whether it's not, which is why you need professional help.
I was going to ask, who does this QDRO? Is it your attorney? Is it someone else?
It could be your attorney. Or it could be a QDRO specialist. Now, over the years, this didn't used to be as much of a thing, but it's a big thing now. And over the years, there are people who specialize in simply writing QDROs, right? And even divorce attorneys, by and large, often defer to the company that specializes in writing QDROs because these documents can be really, really tricky. Now, again, if you've got an IRA, a 401k, a 403b, those kinds of plans, if you mess up the QDRO, you'll see it right away. But if it's a pension, you're not going to know if you made a mistake till years, maybe decades down the line. That is not the position that you want to be in. So it always makes sense to hire a specialist. And so if you're going to use your attorney, ask your attorney whether or not he or she specializes in writing QDROs, whether you could use a QDRO company. The other thing about using a QDRO company, not only is that their specific area of expertise, but they usually charge a flat fee. And your attorney is going to bill by the hour to do the work that they would do probably for less money. Now, one caveat there is that the QDRO company will write the QDRO and, make sure it's all right and get it to you, but then you or your lawyer have got to go get it entered in court. They generally don't go to court for you, right? So you kind of need a hybrid of both attorney and QDRO specialist, But if you're going to go the DIY route, definitely get it with a QDRO specialist, and then you can do your own legwork in the court system if that's what you choose.
Well, and you can't do your own quadro because you wouldn't possibly know what to put in it, right? So when you say doing DIY, you mean doing DIY on the divorce process, but this quadro is something you got to have someone do for you.
Exactly. You go to the QDRO specialist. They do the paperwork for you. But when I say DIY, what I mean is that you might go step in front of the judge, get it filed in court, do that part of it yourself, which is also, it's got to be done right. It's got to be tricky. It's kind of tricky because a lot of, for example, I practice out of Cook County, Illinois. In Cook County, generally, the judge stamps. They sign the original court order, but they stamp the rest and give you a stamped copy. Well, if you send that stamped copy to the QDRO specialist, they're going to bounce it back to you and say that's not good enough. So you wouldn't know that as an ordinary person. If you're a lawyer, you do know, yeah, you've got to get a specific signed copy by the judge, an extra one to send to the QDRO plan administrator so that they'll process it. So there's all these little quirky rules and things that if you don't work in this area, you're not going to know. And again, usually there's a sufficient amount of money at stake. You don't want to
Right.
mess this up.
I think sometimes people feel discouraged and they think, well, I don't want to pay another fee to have a company involved, or I don't want to go through the hassle or the time it's going to take to do this. So I'll just leave that retirement account alone. Maybe I'll take some other assets instead. And you really need to think carefully about that because it is an inconvenience, but it can be very valuable, right?
It can be, like I said, super, super valuable. And you want to think, I mean, what you don't want to do, I've seen cases where people each have, like the husband has 5 different retirement accounts and the wife has 5 different retirement accounts. So that would be 10 QDROs. That would be craziness to keep going back and forth, right? Maybe you want to say the value of my retirement is this, the value of yours is this, and you only switch from one. That
Right.
makes sense. But then you're comparing apples to apples, retirement accounts to retirement accounts, not retirement accounts to the house or to some other investment.
How long does this quadro process take?
That's a good question. It's not instant. I've also seen people who expect that the day after the divorce, the QDRO is going to get entered, they're going to get their money. No, 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 no. It depends on how soon you start, right? The QDRO has first, you've got to decide who gets what. Let's say you've done that. Then the QDRO needs to get written. Then once it's written, it goes to the plan administrator just to say, hey, here's a draft of what we're thinking of doing. Is the language right? Do you approve it? Then the administrator comes back and says either, yes, this works, or no, this doesn't work. You've got to change it. Then you change it and you submit it a second time. And even if it works, then you're like, okay, cool. Now this works. Now you have to take it to the judge, get the judge to sign it. Then that's got to go back over to the plan administrator. And then the plan administrator gets as long as they want to actually implement the change and move the money from one account to the other, right? So, and you don't have a lot of tools available to you to poke at the plan administrator and say, hey, can you do this faster? They're going to do it on whatever timeline they're going to do it on. Yes, if they wait like a crazy amount of time, then you can take steps, to make it move faster. But for the most part, you are not in control. It is not instant. You should always plan on at least months to get from start to money in the bank.
Yeah, it can be a really long process and you don't know how backed up anyone is going to be in this process, how long it'll take you to get in court. And so anyone who is planning on I'm going to get this money and use it for something really important, I always encourage them slow down. You could be waiting for 6 months or more to get that money. You just don't know. You just don't know.
I agree. And so it's, you just can't, you'll get the money, but you just can't plan on having it right away.
Right. Okay, so what about cashing out the retirement assets that you get with this quadro? Like if I want to put money down on a home, is that fine? Can I just cash that money out?
Well, yes, you can, But the question is that a smart financial move? And generally speaking, the answer is going to be no, because don't forget, even if the money goes from one spouse's account to another spouse, you can cash it out initially without that 10% penalty, unless it's deposited into your 401k first and then you take it out, then you're going to pay a penalty. And either way, you're going to pay taxes on whatever amount of money you take out of the retirement account. So, depending on what your tax bracket is, that could make sense. Like if you have no other income and you're going to take out the money for a down payment on the house, okay, that's one thing. But if you're already at a pretty high income level or a high tax bracket, and you take money out of a retirement account to put as a down payment, that's really dumb because a big chunk of it's going to go to taxes. And especially if that extra income puts you over into a higher tax bracket, now it makes even less sense. So before you do that, you've really got to analyze, does this make financial sense in your circumstance?
Excellent. Okay, one more question as we're wrapping up. What if my ex is not signing the paperwork that we need to get this QDRO done?
Okay, first of all, hopefully you had a lawyer, and hopefully the lawyer put language into the divorce papers that said both spouses will comply and will sign everything when asked, blah, 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 blah. And if they don't, then the judge has the authority to sign on behalf of the spouse. That gives you multiple avenues of relief, right? Spouse won't sign it. You're going to need to show the judge you mailed it to him or emailed it to him X number of times. He didn't respond. Judge, enter an order requiring him to sign it, or come into court and sign it right there in front of you, or judge, will you sign it for me? And hopefully the language in your agreement also says, if you have to go to that length to make your spouse do what he was supposed to do in the first place, you get your attorney's fees. He has to pay you for that, right? So there are ways that you can get either your spouse to sign it or a judge on behalf of your spouse to sign it. But what's important to remember is that you need someone to sign it, and you need them to sign it sooner rather than later, because heaven forbid your spouse gets hit by a bus or your ex-spouse gets hit by a bus and he's dead and there's no QDRO. All of that money is still in his account, and now you're fighting in probate court to try to get the money away from whoever it was given to and in your pocket, because that's where it was supposed to be. You do not want to be in that situation.
Wow, really great advice about getting the process going. Now, Karen, I want to talk for a moment about some resources that you have. So first of all, I know that you have a free resource for people, and it's all about a quiz so people can find out if they're ready for divorce, right?
Absolutely. And, one of the biggest questions I get asked is like, should I get a divorce or should I not? Well, part of the answer depends on, are you ready? If this is what's happening to you, whether it was your decision or not, do you have all your ducks in a row? Have you thought of all the right things so that when the process starts, you can go through it as smoothly as possible? So I created a quiz that will help people know. You answer a few questions and it's either going to tell you, yep, you're good to go, or maybe not ready yet, and here's what you want to think about.
That's awesome. We will put a link to that in the show notes. I know it's on your homepage, KarenCovy.com, so we'll put it there so people can get it. But even more importantly, I wanted to talk about your divorce roadmap that I mentioned at the beginning, because this is such a wonderful program for people to go through if they're getting divorced, right?
It absolutely is. I created a structure, a framework, because one of the things that is the most frustrating for people is they don't know as they go through the divorce process what's coming next. So I created a framework. It's 10 steps. You are going to go through those 10 steps no matter which process you use. The order may be a little different, but you're going to go through all those 10 steps and they're going to get you from start to finish. And the roadmap explains what you need to know and how you need to, again, prepare if you've got kids. All the money, it talks about the money issues. It talks about working with a lawyer, deciding whether you need a lawyer, how do you choose a lawyer, and all kinds of things. So it covers all of the basic issues you're going to have to think about if you want to get a divorce. And the best part is You can do it on your own, whatever timing you want. You do it in the luxury of your own home at at your own speed, so that if you have a question, you watch a video. It's a video based program. You see something, you're like, oh, what did she say about that? You don't have to go pay your lawyer again to ask the same question you already asked but forgot the answer to. You just go look at the video again.
And then if people want help as they're divorcing, I know you are a fabulous divorce coach. So tell us a little bit about that.
So as a coach, I work with people all over the world, and I take them from when they're starting to say, should I stay or should I go? Because that's a big decision. It's a place where a lot of people get stuck, especially if they have kids. And then if the answer to that question is no, I don't want a divorce, great. I help you get resources to work on your marriage, because if your marriage was good, you're not talking to me. And then if they decide, no, I want to go through with a divorce, great. Let me help you. I'll coach you through that process so that you can do it with less drama, less pain, and less expense.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. You have been a wealth of knowledge today. It was so great talking to you as always.
And it was wonderful talking to you too, Tracy.